Welcome to my channel. My name's Aika. I'm going to be making a series of videos that might be helpful for people who are interested in psychology and mental health in the United Kingdom. And basically I'll be making a series of videos related to this. The reason why I'm making these videos is because a lot of the information around clinical psychology is quite scattered across different kinds of websites, forums, Facebook, and there's not enough exposure of clinical psychology on YouTube. Actually, I've noticed, and I watch a lot of YouTube, so I want to, I guess, be part of that. So today's video, as you can see from the title, is the basics of how to become a clinical psychologist in the United Kingdom. I have a few notes here, just in case you think that I'm looking down when I'm looking at this sheet of paper. This video will be structured into two parts. The first part is basically just talking through the essential criteria that is required to become a clinical psychologist, and the second part is just quick tips that I wish I knew when I was applying to clinical psychology or was interested in clinical psychology. So to become a clinical psychologist in the UK, that you have to basically get a doctorate in clinical psychology in the UK, or prove that your degree outside the UK is equivalent to that. So this video would be mostly focused on the former, so applying in the UK for the doctorate, so the process towards that. It would be slightly different for international students, and I'm not really familiar for that. Even though I am international myself, I did go through the route of the kind of UK route, or the more traditional route. With this more traditional route, what is required in order to get onto this doctorate of clinical psychology, which is 3 years, to qualify you as a clinical psychologist? Number one is to get an undergraduate degree in psychology. So not just any undergraduate degree in psychology, but one that is eligible for the graduate basis of chartered membership, the GBC. So this is basically a British Psychological Society approved psychology course. Basically, this makes sure that the standard of psychology is taught, and you've went through the necessary kind of skills that you need for undergraduate level. So do make sure that you have that. If you don't have an undergraduate degree in psychology, you'll have to do a psychology conversion course. So there's quite a few of them around, but make sure that these are conversion courses if you are interested in, and not just a general master's in psychology. That's not a conversion course. Those are slightly different. Those are usually people who have done a psychology degree that does have GBC already, so those are slightly different courses. If you have had already a undergraduate degree in psychology, what you would need to do during the undergraduate degree is to attain a 2-1 or above. So 2-1 meaning on average 65% or above, but there is some flexibility sometimes with some universities, but I can't tell you which ones, I don't know them myself. So safe bet is just to try to focus on getting that 2-1 degree, or getting that first. That's the best thing that you can be concentrating on in your undergraduate degree. That's the main reason why you need this, is because during your doctorate degree, to qualify as a clinical psychologist, you have to basically do quite a lot of academic work. So you need to show this basic ability through your undergraduate degree. If you don't have a 2-1, or you get a 2-2, or you get a third, then something that you might have to consider is to do a master's on top of it. So it doesn't have to be a psychology conversion master's anymore. It can be just any generic master's degree in psychology, in mental health, in neuropsychology, anything. And to get something like a distinction or a merit in that, just to show that you can study to that level. And after you get all this academic experience, this is only the absolute baseline. The next thing that you would be required to do, or is essential criteria to get onto the course, so the doctorate course, is some clinical experience. Most universities who allow students to come in to train with them to become a clinical psychologist require 1 year at least of clinical experience. This 1 year is in theory, so you can start applying by 1 year, but realistically people take 2, 3, 4 years to get the sufficient experience to get onto the doctorate course. So do think about that a little bit. So what constitutes as clinical experience? There's a lot of questions about this that I've seen on a lot of forums and a lot of kind of Facebook groups and stuff. Clinical experience is any clinical experience that is patient facing, so you're directly caring for a patient group that's related to mental health in some way. So this can be extremely wide. So just to narrow it down, because when I first started finding jobs, it was quite confusing. There are basically around 4 jobs that you can start looking at. The first 2 are healthcare assistants or support worker. So these are basically jobs where you provide direct care to patients. Most people who are interested in becoming a clinical psychologist, they will find mental health related patients or clients to work with. So this can be in inpatient hospitals, or it can be in the community, helping, let's say, a child working with autism or learning disabilities, things like that. So there's a huge range. So I don't really know what the difference between healthcare assistant and support workers are. I feel like there's quite similar roles, but those are really good first jobs to get when you first graduate out of an undergraduate degree. However, if you have already had some clinical experience during your undergraduate degree because you're super keen and you know exactly what you want to do in an undergraduate degree from your undergraduate degree, and you've already gotten some clinical experience either through like Samaritans or Nightline or something like that, then you can look at PWP work, which is a psychological well-being practitioner work, or you can try to apply for assistant psychologist posts. So this is a whole other video that can be done on these 2 roles. The PWP is basically 1-year training course that qualifies you to become a low-intensity cognitive behavioral therapist. Again, can make another video about what that entails. An assistant psychologist is basically working underneath a clinical psychologist directly, and it really depends on which clinical population. But again, it's the gold standard job to get that clinical experience and get onto the doctorate. Other relevant clinical experience that could count might be things like research assistant, that's patient facing, or working in mental health charity, or really anything that's that you can think about. I can't really think about it right now, but yeah, there's a huge range that can just get your foot in the door. NHS experience is preferred because ultimately clinical psychologists are funded by the NHS, so you want to be able to be familiar with how the NHS works. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about working for a really cool charity or something. You might still have to go back and find something in the NHS just to show that you are experiencing that. Next essential criteria is research experience. So this is less stringent than clinical experience. So you can get research experience via multiple modes of working. The first one, the obvious one, is through your undergraduate degree. If your degree is already accredited by the BPS as a GBC eligible degree, it means that you have had done a research project, so an experimental research project or a qualitative research project, something like that. So that in itself is really good research experience already. Other experiences that you can have in research can be service level research. So if you become a clinical support worker or you've become an assistant psychologist or something like that, and you've been involved in research, then again, that's really good research experience. Other research experience that you can get is from your master's degree. Your master's thesis can count as well. And yeah, so the ultimate thing is basically being able to show that you can conduct, evaluate and design and disseminate research to a good level. I don't know if I mentioned, but also research assistants posts are really good for research experience, obviously. But again, try to make them more kind of clinical psychology focused, but it's not necessary for it to be if you're just looking to show that you have research experience. The reason why you need research experience, this is less, I guess, obvious than the clinical experience. The reason why you need research experience is because becoming a clinical psychologist, we're based on the scientist practitioner model. So the idea that once you qualify as a clinical psychologist, you are supposed to be capable of conducting and evaluating research and, I guess, consuming research at the same time as becoming a clinician and assessing and treating people. So that's really different to becoming a, I guess, generic therapist or a counsellor where you are just doing patient-facing work. So qualitatively, there's a big difference there. Again, we can have a full video on the differences between, the different kinds of therapists there are in the UK, because that's a huge, confusing mumble jumble as well. Second part, really quickly, is tips that I wish I knew before I started. So when I was an undergraduate student, what I wish I knew coming into clinical psychology. The first one is being realistic, so managing your own expectations of how likely you are to get onto the doctorate, because it is a really competitive kind of process to go through. The acceptance rates are 2 to 5% maybe per course, and you're competing with people that might be 5 or 7 or 10 years older than you, that might have lots of experience actually. So it's a really, really tough game to be playing. So kind of managing your expectations, and despite the requirement saying you only need 1 year of clinical experience, managing your expectation that it's probably not going to go that way unless you were really keen and have gotten experience from your undergraduate degree already. A second tip is to make sure that you are going into the years between your undergraduate degree and your doctorate degree with the mindset of learning instead of getting onto the doctorate, because once you get into this process, it becomes very obsessive towards the doctorate, and that's actually it can be unhelpful in helping you get the skills that you need to get onto the doctorate, ironically. So what I'm trying to say is that really just to try to focus on the experiences and the learning that you're getting from that job for the sake of that job. Obviously, yes, it's really important to have doctorate in the back of your mind, but it shouldn't be at the forefront, because the impatience and the difficulties that you go through might feel a lot more intense if that's constantly on your mind. So for example, for the whole of my first year of my clinical experience, I didn't even think about applying to the doctorate, and I think that really, really helped me really focus on the learning part of it, and really trying to reflect on my experiences. Third tip is keeping a reflective journal. I already keep a journal in general, but I think it's really important for people who struggle to think reflectively to in terms of clinical experience, to keep a reflective journal, to I guess orientate yourself to the reflective model that we have in clinical psychology, just to be able to think about what worked well, what didn't work so well, what you can improve on, or what you did, what you could kind of work towards in the future, things like that. I think it's really important, especially if you start stacking up quite a lot of clinical research experience, for you to be able to look back and read through your experiences and how you might think about it now, or how you might have thought about it before. And I think that really will accelerate your learning and reflective ability. And if you want to be a psychologist, naturally, you will have to have this kind of reflective capacity anyway, so it's just good practice. Final tip is to network, and not in the typical sense of networking where you meet a bunch of strangers, but like networking in a sense of if you know that there's a psychologist that you respect, or an academic that you respect, or peers that have very similar mindset as you, or dreams and goals as you, to make sure that you are continuously making the effort to connect with them. The reason I say this is, obviously, firstly, it's really helpful for the doctorate application. You have more people that are, understand the struggle of the doctorate application, to be able to look through your application for you, especially if you have someone that's a clinical psychologist. They've been through the process and they know exactly, what would be, I guess, yeah, just to look through your application to see, whether it's going the right direction. But also they'll help you with mock interviews, or just have solidarity with you, to remind you that you are not in the process alone. And I also felt that with peers in the same career direction or goals, it's really helpful because it gives you a space to reflect and model off each other's learning, and you learn triple as quickly if you have 3 people than if you just reflect on your own experiences. So we've come to an end of the video now. Thank you so much for watching the whole way through. If you have any kind of requests for any videos that you'd like to see from me, then please comment down below or message me privately. And if you are still interested in more topics around psychology and mental health, specifically for the United Kingdom, then do click the subscribe button and follow me through my journey.